What you're watching on the screen is one of the latest flights of Venezuelan nationals being deported. This time around, we saw families. Indeed, families can be deported together, just as Mr. Homan promised. And this one is Venezuela's number 2, another criminal. And he is one of their communist leaders, stating that none of these individuals were TDA gang members, and that the Trump administration is lying about the TDA gang. Obviously, he's going to say that because he was probably one of those who sent them over here, so he'll never admit it. But he should be in jail too. But anyway, promises made, promises kept. These migrants can no longer freeload off the American taxpayers. But it's very interesting. You can tell they love their flag and their country so much. So then why in the world did they leave in the first place? I mean, if you love it so much, just stay there. However, Venezuelan migrants are not the only ones complaining. If you remember, about a month ago, President Trump had that back and forth with the president of Colombia. He rejected his Colombian citizens because of the military planes, supposedly, right? Needless to say, at the end of the day, he folded to President Trump's demands and he picked up his Colombian citizens. Who did what? Did what? You guessed it right again. Complained about the deportation process. Like this Colombian migrant, for example, who stated that the deportation process was inhumane. But wait a minute, look at him right there, celebrating upon his arrival. What is that? I just don't get it. Why would you celebrate after being deported, and then within a few minutes later, you go on national television and whine about the deportation like a little bitch? No, I don't care. I don't care. But first, we do have some major updates. The Alien Registration Act is now being enforced.
Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem joins me now. All right, Secretary, what do you guys have in store?
Well, we are putting in place and enforcing the Alien Registration Act, which is using every single tool that we have at our disposal to do exactly what President Trump promised the American people. The Alien Registration Act says that within 30 days of being in this country illegally, someone must register with the federal government. They will be fingerprinted. They must announce that they are here. And if they do so, they can avoid criminal charges and fines, and we will help them relocate right back to their home country. And what this does is provide them an opportunity to come back someday and to be a part of the American dream. If they don't register, they're breaking the federal law, which has always been in place. We're just going to start enforcing it to make sure that these aliens go back home. And when they want to be an American, then they can come and visit us again.
Second initiative we've been working to learn more about this morning is a mandatory online registry for undocumented immigrants. Now on the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services website, there's this page right here. It says alien registration requirement. And as you scroll down, it tells you who is registered, who must register, and also how to register. And if an undocumented immigrant does not put their information in this new database, there could be some punishment, and it could involve jail time, actually, as we've continued to try to learn more about this.
The freeloaders and the criminals ruined it for everybody else. We also have the TSA no longer letting migrants fly without a valid ID.
At this time last year, Terminal 2 of the San Diego International Airport was filled with asylum seekers. They'd be there for hours, sometimes days, sleeping on these floors while waiting to fly to their sponsor family. Using the CBP One app, they could get through TSA without a government-issued ID. Everything I just described is no longer the case. This part of the airport is empty. The Trump administration not only cracking down on undocumented immigrants coming into the U.S., but also traveling domestically without a valid ID. On Monday, TSA posted to X announcing it will no longer allow undocumented immigrants to use the CBP One app to board domestic flights. The one exception is when they're traveling for self-deportation.
So, if you want to board a flight, it's going to be to get out of the U.S. It's not to move around freely. So they want to make the lives of undocumented immigrants more complicated, obviously. That's just what it is.
It's a new day in America. I mean, even ABC News can't believe the reality of reverse migration.
It's stunning, Diane. There's no other way to put it, really. The amount of people arriving to the U.S. southwest border has plummeted since the peak months that we saw, let's say, 18 months ago. We did start to see the numbers significantly slow down when President Biden was still in office, thanks to pretty intense restrictions that his administration had put into place. But President Trump taking that even further, essentially cutting off any chance at applying for asylum at the U.S. southwest border. Also, when you look at the people coming up from the south, you look at the Darien Gap, which is that land bridge between Colombia and Panama. It's a stretch of jungle that anybody wanting to walk from South America to North America must go through. The number of people that the Panamanian government has registered going through that jungle gap has plummeted to the lowest level that we've seen since February of 2021, when we were right in the middle of the pandemic. So by any metric you look at this, people have stopped arriving for the most part at the U.S. southwest border.
The numbers are so great that even the Roosevelt Hotel will be shutting down soon.
173,000 migrants have come through these doors behind me. You can see them guarded as they've been for the last 2 years, filing through into this shelter and intake center to figure out how they're going to live here in New York City and how they're going to get the care that they need. All of this now coming to an end, if the mayor's plan goes through, by June of this year.
With this closure, we're closing 53 sites within the span of a year. The Roosevelt Hotel, which served as both our asylum arrival center and the humanitarian emergency response and relief center for nearly 2 years, will be closing in the coming months. Thanks to the successful strategies we put in place here in New York City, and because of policies we advocated for at the border.
Yeah, sure. Cut the crap, Eric Adams. We all know that these are President Trump's policies. You were a failure during the migrant crisis. Furthermore, President Trump announced the $5 million gold card.
We're going to be doing something else that's going to be very, very good. We're going to be selling a gold card. You have a green card. This is a gold card. We're going to be putting a price on that card of about $5 million, and that's going to give you green card privileges plus. It's going to be a route to citizenship, and wealthy people will be coming into our country by buying this card. They'll be wealthy, and they'll be successful, and they'll be spending a lot of money and paying a lot of taxes and employing a lot of people.
Do you have to invest a certain amount of money in this country in order to qualify for that gold card?
Yeah, exactly.
So the EB-5 program was really, you lend some money, but it was full of nonsense, make-believe, and fraud, and it was a way to get a green card that was low-priced. So the president said, rather than having this sort of ridiculous EB-5 program, we're going to end the EB-5 program. We're going to replace it with the Trump Gold Card, which is really a green card gold. So they'll be able to pay $5 million to the U.S. government. They'll have to go through vetting, of course. We're going to make sure they're wonderful, world-class global citizens. They can come to America. The president can give them a green card, and they can invest in America, and we can use that money to reduce our deficit. Why do we give out lotteries of green cards? Why do we give out EB-5 for green cards? The president of the United States understands that the right answer is, why don't we eliminate the deficit of the United States of America instead?
They'll have to pay, if they create jobs in the United States, they'll pay full taxes like everybody else. So you're getting big taxpayers, big job producers, and we'll be able to sell maybe 1 million of these cards, maybe more than that. And if you add up the numbers, they're pretty good. As an example, 1 million cards would be worth $5 trillion. $5 trillion.
Wow.
And if you sell 10 million of the cards, that's a total of $50 trillion. Well, we have 35 trillion in debt. That'd be nice. So we have it all worked out from the legal standpoint. It's totally legal to do.
Well, at least you know that none of these new applicants will be seeking shelter accommodations at the taxpayers' expense. Additionally, we had the very first Trump cabinet meeting, where many great things were discussed, including the great job that Elon Musk is doing with DOGE right now. But we'll touch base on that a little bit later because we just got some major breaking news. Apparently, the Epstein client list will be revealed.
A lot of people are wondering, because you said last week that you have the Epstein Files on your desk, is when can we see them and what's taking so long to release them?
I do. Jesse, there are well over, this will make you sick, 200 victims. 200. So we have, well over 250 actually. So we have to make sure that their identity is protected and their personal information. But other than that, I think tomorrow, the personal information of victims. Other than that, I think tomorrow, Jesse, breaking news right now, you're going to see some Epstein information being released by my office.
What kind? Are we going to see who was on the flights? Are we going to see any evidence from what he recorded? Because he had all of his homes wired with recording devices.
Yeah. What you're going to see, hopefully tomorrow, is a lot of flight logs, a lot of names, a lot of information. But it's pretty sick what that man did.
Okay. Well,
along with his co-defendant.
Absolutely. And he had help. That's for sure.
He sure did.
By the time this episode airs, you might have seen those documents already. But if you haven't, make sure to follow me on X, where I'll be posting and reposting a lot of this information. In any event, it is now time to go over the Colombian migrants complaining about the deportation process. The individuals you're about to hear from stated the deportation process was inhumane, the food was no good, and the treatment was horrible. They even said the American people are blaming the migrants for their problems. So how dare you, Americans? How ridiculous. Well, I'll tell you what is inhumane. You guys crossing the border illegally and then abusing the system based on a lie. At least have the decency not to abuse the American taxpayers. So get out and stay out. Let's get started. So let's start with the first report. On this one, the journalist is explaining how about 200 Colombian citizens are, or just were, deported by the United States. And she goes over the details of the back and forth President Trump had with the Colombian president. And this is where you see the footage of the clown celebrating right before he went on to complain. So let's just go over his complaint. So here they're arriving, and then he says it was horrible. They were laughing and saying, you will all be deported because Daddy Trump is in the house. And they were taking things away from people, he's saying. And there was a lady who had heart issues, and she was not supposed to be flying, he says, but they still took her anyway. And she had a scene, and that's why we stopped in Houston, so that she could be, so that they could check on her, so that the medical staff could look into her situation. But he says, honestly, this is just a strategy. The Americans are blaming are blaming the ones who cannot defend themselves. They're blaming us, the migrants. But they didn't give us any rights. They forced us to sign documents. And yes, the treatment was completely inhumane. So this Colombian migrant is saying that they only allowed him to speak to his family one time. And that was about it. And then this other one says that he didn't like the treatment in the US. The food was horrible. The facility was terrible. And what about your belongings? He says, no, everything got lost. They didn't tell us anything. Were you shackled? Yes, I was shackled. And he's saying that the returning flight was excellent. So it was good. Remember that the Colombian president picked them up with a Colombian plane. So they enjoyed that ride better than the one where they were shackled by ICE. This is where you see the cultural difference, right? And then the media, obviously this is the Colombian media, they are catering to their complaints. Like, oh, you were arrested. Oh, what happened to your stuff? And, oh, really? And what else? Like, what happened? Like, they don't understand that if you cross the border illegally, you are committing a federal crime. It's like you can say it 100 times. They don't want to hear it. Let's go on. This is another one who admitted to crossing the border illegally. And she says that she left her country, she left Colombia due to safety concerns. And she went, she got to the US with her children. And so she's naming a certain city in Colombia where she was being threatened, according to her. But as soon as she arrived, they caught her. And so she got deported. But she's there on national television. I mean, I wouldn't be doing that, right? If I came back to a country where I was in danger, I wouldn't be going on national television. But anyway, she's saying that she is most likely going to try to cross the border illegally again into the US, of course. And she did say that perhaps she will attempt to go to another country. But she did say that it is possible for her to try to return to the US. So here's another Colombian migrant, and the media is asking, you know, President Trump stated you guys were criminals. What do you say about that? And he says, well, they treated us like criminals. We were arrested. We were shackled. But it was not right. So they're asking him about the experience. We were in Tijuana, he says. But what do you want to do in the US? I just wanted to be with my family, he says. So they're asking him about the conditions. And he says, well, the Colombian plane was great. We got food and the treatment was great. Everything was done perfect by Colombia, he says. But the US, no, the US plane was no good. I had handcuffs in the US, but coming in the Colombian plane, I didn't have them. They keep asking him about ICE. And he says, I mean, I'm speechless. They're inhumane. They have no sense of human rights with anyone. With the Colombians, he says. They ask him about other migrants. And he says, there are kids that are unable to see their parents. They are separating families, he says. And you're unable to speak to your family members. We do not have any human rights over there. We were there for a long time, and They hit you, they push you, they don't respect you. The gringos, there's something else, to be honest. I was there for about 15 days. We received the same food every day. It was the same flavor. He says a lot of us migrants lost many belongings, including cell phones and other personal items. I got lucky, he says, but I did see other people lose their personal items. Will you go back to the US? The reporter asks, and he says, no, no, no. I will not be going back. And a lot of us who got deported will never go back as well. He says there was a point where they left the doors open and we were there taking the cold weather in Florida. And we were just waiting and waiting in that military plane. He's explaining that he has family in Mexico and he was there for a little bit. And then around January of this year, he decided to cross the border illegally. And that's when he got detained. They, meaning ICE, play a lot of games, he says. They play a lot of mental games and you have no communication with your family. Someone asked him, how much do you pay to cross the border illegally? And he says, it was a lot of money. This is another Colombian migrant, and they're asking him about the president of Colombia stating that they were not being treated properly. And he says, that is correct. We were completely shackled from head to toe. And he says, well, we were not punched or anything like that, but they were speaking in English and they were perhaps making fun of us, but we didn't understand what they were saying. So the reporter asks, did they punch you? Did they push you? And he says, no, they didn't. So now this one is saying no, but the one that we heard from a few minutes ago said yes, right? So, I mean, this is so ridiculous. Then he is sharing his experience of crossing the border illegally from Tijuana and then entering California. That's where we were detained and they didn't even interview us. They didn't let us speak. Nothing. Absolutely nothing, he says. This other Colombian migrant says, it is horrible what they're doing to us, the migrants. I was there for about 15 days. And this other Colombian migrant says, ever since I entered the country, I was a migrant and I never left the shelters, she says. I was able to live in 3 shelters. Then they ask her, how much did you pay to enter the country illegally? And she says it was around 15 million Colombian pesos, which is around $3,600 according to Google. She says she entered with her granddaughters, who are 9 and 11 years old. She also came through Tijuana, Mexico. And then here is another camera angle of the same migrant who we heard from earlier. This is the one who said that they are separating families and they don't let you communicate with your families and they do push you and hit you. They don't respect you and they don't give you any human rights. The gringos are something else, he says. And there it is, the good old entitlement mentality. Of course, none of these individuals are representing all Colombians and Venezuelans, but we do see a pattern of those who cross the border illegally. They believe they have the right to be accepted into the country and be given documentation for free or for a very small fee. They couldn't care less about those immigrants who are paying their fees and waiting their time. And obviously, even much less about the American taxpayers. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Now, this is the recap of Elon Musk's intervention about DOGE during President Trump's first cabinet meeting.
And based on many things in the border, but also based on balancing budgets and getting our country back into shape. And this is a big part of it. So Elon, if you could get up and explain where you are, how you're doing, and how much we're successful guy. He's really working so hard, and he's got businesses to run. And in many ways I say, how do you do this? And, he's sacrificing a lot and getting a lot of praise, I'll tell you, but he's also getting hit, and we would expect that, and that's the way it works. So I'd like to have Elon Musk please say a few words.
Well,
thank you, Elon.
Thank you, Mr. President. I actually just call myself a humble tech support here because this is actually, as crazy as it sounds, that is almost a literal description of the work that the DOGE team is doing, is helping fix the government computer systems. Many of these systems are extremely old. They don't communicate. There are a lot of mistakes in the systems. The software doesn't work. So we are actually tech support. It's ironic that it's true. The overall goal here with the DOGE team is to help address the enormous deficit. We simply cannot sustain as a country $2 trillion deficits. The interest rates, just the interest on the national debt, now exceeds the Defense Department spending. We spend a lot on the Defense Department, but we're spending over $1 trillion on interest. If this continues, the country will become de facto bankrupt. It's not an optional thing; it is an essential thing. That's the reason I'm here, and taking a lot of flack and getting a lot of death threats. By the way, I mean I'd like to stack them up, But if we don't do this, America will go bankrupt. That's why it has to be done. And I'm confident at this point, knock on wood, knock on my wooden head. There's got a lot of wood up there, that we can actually find $1 trillion in savings. That would be roughly 15% of the $7 trillion budget. And obviously that can only be done with the support of everyone in this room. And I'd like to thank everyone for your support. Thank you very much. This can only be done with your support. So it's really, DOGE is a support function for the president and for the agencies and departments to help achieve those savings and to effectively find 15% in reduction in fraud and waste. And we bring the receipts. So people say well, is this real? Just go to doge.gov. We line item by line item, we specify each item. So, and I should say, we will make mistakes. We won't be perfect, but when we make a mistake, we'll fix it very quickly. So for example, with USAID, one of the things we accidentally canceled very briefly was Ebola prevention. I think we all want Ebola prevention. So we restored the Ebola prevention immediately, and there was no interruption. We do need to move quickly if we're to achieve a $1 trillion deficit reduction in financial year 2026. It requires saving $4 billion per day, every day, from now through the end of September. But we can do it, and we will do it.
If you would have any questions, please ask. You could ask me or Elon. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Musk. I just wanted to ask you that President Trump put out a Truth Social today saying that everybody in the cabinet was happy with you. I just wondered if you had heard otherwise, and if so, what are you doing to address those any dissatisfaction?
Maybe let the cabinet speak just for a second. Is anybody unhappy with Elon? If you are, we'll throw him out of here. Is anybody unhappy? Disagree a little bit, but I will tell you, for the most part, I think everyone's not only happy, they're thrilled. So go ahead, Elon.
Great. And I do not give false praise. This is an incredible group of people. I don't think that such a talented team has actually ever been assembled. I think it's literally the best cabinet that the country has ever had, and I think the company should be incredibly appreciative of the people in this room.
Mr. President, thank you, Mr. Musk. Are there about half of the government employees so far appear to have responded to your request for what they've been doing over the past week? Is there a timeline in place for next moves for people being fired, and when can the American people expect to see results of that?
Yes. Well, to be clear, I think that email perhaps was best interpreted as a performance review, but actually it was a pulse check review. Do you have a pulse? Do you have a pulse and 2 neurons? So if you have a pulse and 2 neurons, you can reply to an email. This is, I think not a high bar, is what I'm saying. This is should be anyone could accomplish this, but what we are trying to get to the bottom of is we think there are a number of people on the government payroll who are dead, which is probably why they can't respond, and some people who are not real people, like they're literally fictional individuals that are collecting paychecks. Well, somebody's collecting paychecks on a fictional individual, so we're just literally trying to figure out: are these people real? Are they alive? And can they write an email? Which I think is a reasonable expectation for the American public would have at least that expectation of someone in the public sector.
But those people are on the bubble, as they say. Maybe they're going to be gone. Maybe they're not around. Maybe they have other jobs. Maybe they moved and they're not where they're supposed to be. A lot of things could have happened. I wouldn't say that Biden ran a very tight administration. They spent money like nobody's ever spent money before, wasted money. The Green New Scam, all of the different things they spent money on. And you've seen that. We've seen that with some of the things that I read in speeches. I read them and people can't believe when I read them. 20 million here, 30 million here for, a little educational cost on something. Circumcision, right? Circumcision. $20 million to inform the people of such and such a country.
It's phenomenal that this is being discussed at the highest levels of our government because all of us pay taxes. And it's infuriating to find out that all of those tax dollars were being thrown in the trash. Finally, some accountability. Guys, thank you for watching. Please smash the like button, subscribe, and share this video with everyone you know. The shoutouts for those of you who go the extra mile are down below. Thank you again for the amazing support. Take care, and I'll see you next time.